Hey everybody, it's Brady here from Inner Strength Check, rolling dice and playing games for personal growth and social change. And without further ado, let's get into it. G'day everyone. You may hear the sweet, subtle sounds of suburbia, kids screaming, dogs barking in the background, my rickety chair, and all manner of other things. So yeah, look, I'll try and get this through this as best as I can, and I'm already muddling up my sentences. So, look, my last episode I feel was a bit tangential and rambly, and while all my episodes are going to be pretty much that, I kind of wanted to take a bit of a different tack. So, just a bit of a prelude discussion. So, I've got the week off. At the moment, I've got my bullet journal open with my handwritten notes because when I type things, my brain it's just Teflon. If I type notes out for the show, it might as well not be there. I don't know. That's just my brain. But I've sat down, I've done some dot points. Look, there's been a lot of barriers in me getting more content out, and I thought I'd have a bit of a chat about those barriers, considering two things. I mean, the podcast is meant to be sort of have a bit of a mental health focus, but not also entirely. I'll get to that in a minute. But if I'm being honest, where I'm at right now in terms of my current situation, I'm in a pretty bad state. I mean, I've lived with chronic depression and anxiety my whole adult life and part of my adolescence as well. But I think things have really kind of gotten bad. Sort of an intermingling of burnout, depression, anxiety, and ADHD all kind of fueling into each other in this just mucky ball of low mood, lack of interest in things, feeling physically burnt out, feeling unmotivated, having difficulty completing tasks. It's actually gotten a lot kind of worse than I'd given it credit for. And I think that unfortunately myself, like many other people, when we sort of stand back, it's just similar to the idea of like notion of like functional alcoholism or whatever, where we kind of say, oh, well, you're working, so you're functional. Well, yeah. Anyway, the good news is that I have a week off, which was direly needed. And it's given me some breathing time and space. And one of the things I really wanted to do was to get some content out. It's just that with the craziness of everything that's happening in my personal life and my work life, days off are I just need to recuperate on those days. So I'm feeling slightly fresh enough to get into it, but that's been a barrier. I think also I have some ongoing kind of unrealistic standards about just getting stuck into podcasting and pressing record and just sort of trusting my own kind of instincts, trusting my own capacity, my own ability. There's been a negative self-talk around it. I think also I'm very prone to, whenever I engage in a hobby or something of interest to me, I can very quickly flip over to having some pretty unfair and unrealistic standards about what I'm doing versus where I'm at. For instance, let's say getting frustrated, for instance, with surfing, because I'm not immediately like standing up and shredding, bro. But also like with regards to podcasting, you know, I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, especially the depression's taken hold to a point where weirdly enough I've lost a lot of interest in listening to music, which is very unlike me. But in lieu of that, I've been spending a fair bit of time listening to podcasts, and I've had to step back and reframe it, kind of the negative thoughts I've had about podcasting itself, in that, you know, you've got to sort of be a bit of a detective and go, well, look, your own brand or your podcast might not be at XYZ person's level, but that person is potentially dependent on that podcast for their income. They have a Patreon, all that sort of stuff. So they've got the time and the space. The other thing though is that I guess I can be the more I get into sort of therapy and my own sort of mental health journey, the funnier it is. It's just, I've always thought, being a neurodivergent person, I've always grown up thinking like, yeah, man, like I can totally think in like shades of grey and stuff, bro. And like I can for other people in situations, but when it comes to me, it's very all or nothing. So look, I have a tendency to want to go 150,000% on something if it's something I'm into, and I know that I can exhaust myself doing that, and I'm already exhausted. However, again, going back to this all or nothing sort of thing, it's sort of the switch is flipped where I've just been avoidant of it, and in trying to be like compassionate and, you know, accepting of where I'm at, I've spent a lot of time basically just being like, no man, just take it easy right now, you got a lot on your plate, because I won't go into too much into my personal life, but it's just been a lot. It's been relentless. But I think I think depression or negativity bias, that sort of, you know, has nicely coddled me into being avoidant of podcasting, because it's like, no man, you should be sitting back, you should be relaxing, don't worry about it, you're stressed from work, that sort of stuff. But the thing is if I'm interested in something, it's going to be wedged somewhere in my brain, in my frontal lobe. It's just nailed to the back of my brain in that hindbrain area, and it's just going to be sitting there mockingly until something's done about it. And in the spirit of trying to reduce my stress, I think it's actually increased my stress by holding off on having these sorts of discussions. And when I go to do it, I sort of have these kind of unrealistic standards of like, oh, I must have this essay script and it has to be of X, you know, kind of caliber. And it doesn't help that whenever I try to get back into podcasting, there's a lot of these sorts of a lot of the websites that are out there, they're, you know, it's very much around brand, and it's very, it kind of feels like it's been co-opted a lot by hustle and grind culture. You know, the whole kind of mill of content creation and securing and maintaining an audience, it just feels disingenuous and manufactured to me at times. So that can be kind of a barrier too. But look, here I am. For me, what has sort of changed about my mental health trajectory is that, again, my entire life I've had chronic depression that's either sort of at a sort of stable, I guess I could say my best is slightly shittier than the average person, and my worst is pretty fucked. But the most concerning feature for me recently has been, because depression itself and depressive episodes can take different forms at different times, and not at any point in my life, no matter how depressed or anxious I've been, even when I was hospitalized, I'd never lost all interest in things like, for instance, video games. Lately, that's not even on my radar. I've been playing Such Art, which is like a painting simulator, and that's about it. Lost a lot of interest in music. That scared me. More on that later. Lost interest in music. I mean, even the last couple of days, I live near the beach now, and the beach has always had this automatic kind of down-regulating, soothing kind of sensory effect on me. It's been great. Like, you know, I'm not a spiritual guy, but it's the closest to a spiritual thing. Gigs and beach, they feel the closest, I'd imagine, you know, to a spiritual experience, but there's been none of that lately. Everything's just felt like a chore, that sort of thing. And like my self-esteem and my self-efficacy have just absolutely just bottomed out. So I think that also impacted on things. And yeah, so all that yucky stuff kind of got in the way. And the other thing is just like, I think I've had this perception of having to make this podcast very granular and in-depth. Okay, I need to go off and I need to, you know, have this well resourced in terms of specific sources and research and that sort of thing. And again, that is fine if you aren't also contending with mental illness and, you know, a fairly tough line of work, a rewarding but tough line of work, being a social worker, and other things going on in your personal life. You know, yeah. I'm not very good at cutting myself some slack. I'm consistently told by people that know me to cut myself some slack, but that's something that I'm working on ongoing. But look, the perception of needing to make this like a granular, in-depth thing, I feel like it honestly veers it more towards like it being like work. You know, it brings along all these sorts of expectations, that sort of thing. And if you think about it, well-produced podcast, so not this one, it has that layer of research and depth. But again, reframing that, there's often a team of people behind that, or the person doing that research, they've got the time to do that. Anyway, and I wanted to make this come back to the original intention of being more top down with a focus on hobbies, leisure, and fun. And sure, I wanted to use some empirical science to back that up, but the main kind of onus of this is, I think, my frustration is that as a millennial and being born into honestly what can often feel like such a doomed generation, millennial, Gen Z. I mean, September 11 when I was 12, and the housing market, the labor market. Look, I don't need to go into all these sociological level problems. There's plenty of other podcasts for that. I had wanted to work a lot of that into this podcast, but I don't know if that's going to be useful, because the other thing is that I'm a social worker, so I'm paid essentially to take both that micro individual, what's going on in someone's head, and what are all the systemic barriers and stuff. Like, I do that for a job. And initially, while I thought that it might be useful or cool for someone with that background to have a very detailed analytic focus on hobbies and leisures from that perspective, I think it's just that as an idea is just exhausting to me. And I think it took some reflection until I was able to go, okay, that's probably the reason why I'm not engaging in it. And also, I think, I don't know, maybe it's my own kind of psychological hang-ups. Like, as you can tell, I'm pretty verbose and I intellectualize a lot. So maybe there was like some sort of element of wanting to play like an expert role or an instructor role or something. But like, you know what? I do that on the clock and it takes a lot of energy for me to do that. And so to back that up in podcast form, where as opposed to say in my work, it's hit or miss with results, variables and people and oppression and disadvantage, whether people improve, stay the same, or get worse. That's a whole other discussion for another day in my line of work. But at the very least in that format, I'm being paid to do that, and there is tangible kind of feedback that you get around someone's situation. Having this additional onus of providing some sort of like clinical level expertise on what's meant to be a fun subject, number one, sure, it makes it boring for you guys. Number two, for me, I think it's a bit much. So I'm kind of wanting to come back to the original intention of this podcast, which is, if you can imagine, if you can a mental image of an upside down pyramid, the top of the pyramid should be hobbies, music, leisure, and fun. And that should be filtering down towards the bottom as to, as you're sort of working your way down, talking about some of the rationale and reasoning behind why, in a day and age where so many of us are stuck on antidepressants and cycling in and out of the mental health system, whether it's the psychiatric system, through multiple psychologists, mental health care plan referrals, that sort of thing, trialing multiple medications and just not feeling as much overall tangible benefit as good experiences like going to gigs, playing role-playing games, those sorts of things. I just really want to validate, yeah, sure, partly empirically, but also personally, around how those things are actually valid tools for us to improve our mental health and our well-being, but also just find a sense of meaning in what's an increasingly secularized and very nihilistic kind of globalized society. Anyway, that's all pretty lofty stuff, but I think if I approach this from podcaster as expert, of course, I'm going to disengage from it right now, particularly because I'm feeling burnt out. So I think what would be more useful would be to cough loudly. What would be more useful would be just to take a step back from that and go, well, what's this about? And it's about pretty much owning the fact that even in the presence of mental illness or oppression or executive dysfunction or whatever, I do believe that everyone has the right to and capacity to access powerful therapeutic relief from things that we often, you hear things about, what sort of strategies do you like to use when you're feeling depressed or down? But I really want to sort of reiterate the importance of those, not just for ourselves and our individual mental health, but also for building communities, communities around music, communities around gaming, that sort of thing, hobby communities, that sort of stuff. Because a lack of community and increased social isolation are absolute huge drivers of the increases we're seeing in all forms of mental health presentation lately. Anyway, and to be honest, part of it too, from a neurodivergent, probably also depression perspective, is just imposter syndrome. I have the same imposter syndrome of feeling that I'm not a podcaster that I feel when I run tabletop role-playing games and go, I'm not a game master, and then I go to work and I go, I'm not a social worker, I'm not a musician. That sense is that there's a very powerful disarming sense behind that, and a lot of that I think is what I've come to realize is baked very much entwined into my identity of a neurodivergent person in a neurotypical world, and just feeling like I don't fit in. I've never fit in, and then I'm feeling like I'm constantly faking it till I make it. And you know what? I've actually done okay for myself faking it till I make it. So I figure, well, the only kind of antidote to this imposter syndrome is to therapeutically work on that. The other is to just get stuck in. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I think a lot of what ails me at the moment is actual fatigue, but also like a perceived fatigue and a perceived sense of this is going to be so much more harder than what it is. It's a bit of almost like, I guess you can say, anxiety-based catastrophizing, a bit of cognitive dysfunction of making it this entity that's much larger than what it is. So, I could sit there and do CBT on myself and all that sort of stuff, but I could also do a bit of plain old exposure therapy. Just sit down and just hit the record button, press play, and see what happens. Because the other thing is that I'm not actually too worried if people are, I'm not too worried about like maximizing my engagement or, boosting your metrics and making promises I can't keep and getting in the content. I really don't want to, as I said before, I'm very prone to, if there's something I enjoy, I'm very prone to turning that into something unenjoyable by heaping unrealistic standards on myself, and I don't want that for this. And I would like for this podcast to be some lived experience around how, getting past those sorts of barriers. I want to be demonstrable evidence that people who are fucked in the head, like myself, can, even in the presence of very major mental illness or other things, what other people have going on, trauma, disadvantage, intersectionality, still maintain a meaningful life. And I'm a very strong believer in things that we often overlook as part of our mental health routine or as part of our sense of community. Things like going for a surf or like playing Dungeons and Dragons or a video game, playing some music. Those things are crucial, and they're not just crucial for our well-being, they're crucial for forming community in a day and age of individualization. So that is my extremely long-winded preface to this episode. If you're still listening, I take my hat off to you. But look, so that's sort of the first part of this. the second part, I sort of want to have a bit of a chat around what you can expect from this podcast for 2023, and it might give you a bit of an idea as to whether you'd be interested in it or not. Now, as I said, I want to kind of get the focus away from it being mental health first, and I actually want to sort of flip it. But I want to make it focused around hobbies and that sort of thing from the lens of XYZ. But I guess the hard part is, if I look at 2023, to me it still feels like March 2020, but also that 25 years have passed since then. And as I said, I'm not doing that well. So if I talk about what I'm looking forward to in 2023, I can't give you an honest answer about that. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, I'm not looking forward to anything this year. I'm just simply depressed at the moment and focused on survival. But there is plenty that is on the radar for this year for me, and in terms of this podcast. So I would like to sort of go through those kind of sequentially in the main kinds of areas. Now I do talk a lot about hobbies and that sort of thing, and my main kind of spheres of hobbies are things like music, tabletop role playing, and gaming. So in regards to music, look, I've always been someone that has consistently, I remember every single week, every Tuesday night, staying up and recording 3 hours of Power and Full Metal Racket and bringing the tapes to school to my mates. And like, as soon as I had a CD burn, I was burning everyone, mixed CDs and that sort of stuff. I've always been this dude who's been just hyper fixated on, oh, have you heard this? Have you heard that band? I'm sure I drove all my friends nuts. But I've always had a consistent, just chronic fixation on what's new out there musically. And I just think that the overall the overall burnout of the past few years, the pandemic, everything, all that sort of stuff, I really do think that even though it was something that stayed constant for many years, say when I was writing for Overdrive Music Magazine, constantly just deluging myself with new music, I think something finally sort of snapped and I just disengaged from that. But one of my goals for this year is to slowly get myself just back into the flow of listening to new releases. So I'm hoping that may include some reviews. And around music reviews, look, I'm absolutely happy to review any music that anyone sends me. Primarily, I have an interest in stuff like heavy music or like, experimental stuff, but I'm happy to listen to pretty much anything and review it if you'd like me to. I'm a little undecided in terms of workflow because I'm mindful as I ease back into a flow where I am producing some content at a nice steady rate, and it means that it's sustainable for me with my life situation. I don't want to sort of overdo it. So I've been considering doing typed reviews and putting them on the blog and then actually narrating those. Although I'm also I'm a bit undecided. So what I think I may do is kind of, as opposed to doing that, which is a fair bit of double up, potentially maybe doing some either self-contained episodes or as part of ongoing episodes, bit of like a music roundup. So some kind of mini reviews and some thoughts on some new music. So kind of multiple reviews in one. I'm definitely happy to review gigs. So I'm looking at potentially maybe reviewing the New Dead Festival. I still need to find out my work roster situation on that one. So gigs. And I would absolutely love, one thing I would love to do, just so that this isn't all a solo orator, is some interviews. So interviews with artists, interviews with musicians in the industry, and that can be around music releases, that can be around, if we're talking things like around mental health or, the sort of practical realities of being a musician or working in the industry, or just sort of the adjustment to life as a creative in the current situation, anything around that sort of. I mean, there are so many topics in my head. It's hard for me to even. I've got lists, trust me, but they're too huge for the purpose of any episode. But get creative, I guess. So I would love to interview artists, people involved in the industry. That can be sound engineers, promoters, whoever. I'm interested in throwing a wide net there. I'm also actually considering this year, one of my goals is to start creating my own music again. I'm thinking of starting with just some simple ambient, just for some, even as a backing track for an episode like this. I am sort of considering, I'm a little bit, not too isolated, but I'm on the end of a rural area, so I'm thinking about dipping my toes into maybe a one-man sort of music project of some sort. And I've got this vague sort of idea of making a sort of discordance axis by way of Strap Young Lad, by way of Expander, so kind of industrial thrash, grindcore, technical-ish thing. But that involves dipping my toes in the world of DAWs and recording, and that's probably a bit much for now. But I've got a general gist of wanting to do something in that vein. That, of course, runs immediately into a lot of musician imposter syndrome, which is one of the reasons I haven't started on it. But I also do want to do some topical episodes on like the music industry itself, how it relates to things like being the therapeutic tool, some of the issues or benefits and all that sort of thing around music communities, that sort of thing. So that's the music end of things. In terms of tabletop role-playing games, so my intention here, so it's going to be similar to music, where with both, I actually do want to be, and I have been recently, I mean, I got zucked off of Instagram, whoopsie, for playing tabs, but I do intend on just doing some live streams where I just play some songs and jam and have fun, because how else can I talk about and elucidate and preach the value of fun and hobbies if I'm just sitting here idly talking about them? So I do plan on playing some music streams as well, and music streams, I'm thinking like some themed ones. So for instance, like an Opeth guitar stream or an Opeth bass stream or specific albums, that sort of thing. Yeah. But the reason I mention that in the context of tabletop role-playing games is, again, tabletop role-playing was something which at the start of this podcast I was kind of angling to look at from a much more empirical game therapy focused format, which is fine, and I'll bake some of that into it, but my intention is to have fun first. Like, there's been a couple of games that I've tried out, and I've tried them out with the intention of potentially making an episode about them, and maybe this is just an ADHD thing, or it's just how you talk to yourself talk around it, but I found that playing them with the intention to write about them or speak about them just made them work, you know, and I got a lot more kind of anxious around, oh, well, I have to make sure I've noted all the things that have happened, and it broke the flow for me. I'm thinking of trying some campaigns out for fun and then reporting back. So at the moment, if you're on Instagram, on my Instagram, you might have seen my silly posts about Twilight 2000, which I can talk at great length about, but I won't. That's not COVID, don't worry. I've just got a head full of salt water from getting slammed into the beach because I'm a kook surfer. But there's a few systems that I want to try out some solo role-playing campaigns for. And again, even just playing RPGs by myself runs into very similar issues that I face when I'm playing guitar by myself or doing literally pretty much any other hobby. It becomes this exercise in, oh, it has to be taken to X extreme. Oh, it's too much. My brain is too much. But my intention is I'm not sure how I'm going to swing this, because again, it comes back to a similar idea of the music format. Do I want to do a bit of a campaign, solo campaign, and just kind of like report back on the whole thing? Or do I want to make it into some cool narrative thing? I don't know. I want to kind of keep that open-ended, but I also am mindful of not overloading myself there. So for instance, with the Twilight 2000 RPG, I was actually thinking of doing a bit of a like, not audio drama, but like some sort of like audio recount that's got accents and characters and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit more of like almost a story format, as opposed to, I'm sure it's not that great for you know, for you to be sitting there on Spotify on your commute hearing, oh no, that's a 6, so that's a this and that, you know, save that for Twitch. But so workload pending, you know, some things, some sort of post hoc reports. For instance, I've got a Mutant Year Zero campaign that is sort of reaching its epic kind of climax. So the big finale. I feel like I've got a lot to say about that system, about Free League publishing. I'm a massive Free League publishing stan, especially as someone with dyscalculia, which is some maths dysfunction related to the ADHD. I find tabletop really daunting, especially to run, and I've got a lot to say about that. And Free League's games have been very helpful for me and for others I know in that respect. But I thought a nice campaign post-mortem, so a bit of a review on the system, but also specifically if the players consent to it and to what level, about the campaign itself. So weaving in a bit of a narrative about the story of the arc, etc. Look, another thing I'm really mindful of is not opportunistically creating content when big things emerge. So yeah, we've got all this sort of drama around the open gaming license and 5th edition and all that sort of stuff. And I was tempted to make an episode on it, but I really don't want to sort of reactively put out stuff because that just feels disingenuous. So, you know, I really want to avoid that perceived pressure of doing that. And of course I will be talking about gaming, video gaming, that sort of stuff, but I actually do feel like my interest in video gaming in general is waning a bit. So I will be talking about it, but because I do think video gaming is actually really therapeutic for me, and the fact that I'm not gaming as much, I can tell, is actually having an impact on my mental health. I actually need to play more video games. I'm not kidding. Or be okay with playing more video games, because I can feel a difference in the lack of doing so. So we'll be talking about that. But yeah, look, there's a myriad of other topics. Anything you can think of, from like conspiracy theories to digital minimalism. I'm going to be covering a lot of other random stuff like that. But I don't feel that I'm in the space to talk in that sort of psychiatric or sociological kind of frame. You know, my intention of this show is to discuss and demonstrate how we can keep sane and empowered in the absolute fucking capitalist dystopia that is 2023. And again, I want to move away from that perception of needing to impart advice. So yeah, a very unsubtle page flip in the background there. But you know what? I actually want to take a brief minute to just talk about some things that are coming up in terms of hobby stuff that is coming my way, like literally is coming my way. In terms of music, I will be purchasing a fretless bass off my friend, which I'm excited about. Gigs, look, again, I don't want to sound unappreciative or ungrateful, but I have been that flat that I haven't been excited about them. But like, I'm going to see a lot of what's coming out in 2023 is a lot of nostalgia stuff, like a lot of like 2000s, 90s, a lot of Gen X, early millennial or late millennial, just like big ticket stuff from like the early 2000s is making its way out all at once at the moment. I mean, we've got like, so I saw Borderline Destruction Festival last weekend with Unearthed and King Parrot and that sort of thing. There was Comeback Kid, all sorts of stuff like that. Some great local gigs. For for instance, I'm seeing Darkest Hour tomorrow. Literally, as I was hitting record on this episode, one of my friends who knows who he is, he's very into his gigs. He's basically my Facebook events page. Invited me to Henry Rollins, who's coming out. There's also Knocked Loose, Into the Fall Festival, Not Fest, Darkest Hour, Alexis on Fire, Psy from Japan. That should be an interesting one. Emperor, but this comes up against a little bit of an issue for me where, because my work is very taxing on me, I do live somewhere that's within a couple of hours of Melbourne, but I think I was initially excited for moving where I moved because I liked the idea of having it both ways, of like being able to drive to Melbourne for gigs and then fuck off home and go to sleep, wake up in time for work the next day. And the nature of my work at the moment is a little bit more demanding than that. So the practical reality of that is, and plus fuel and all that sort of jazz, it's something I have to kind of weigh up, so I actually need to there's just been so many gigs that have been announced. It's a fucking onslaught. And look, first world problems, but it's a good first world problem to have. There's so many coming up. I can't even make heads or tails of it. It actually has spun me out a bit. But as I guess that my mental health improves, which I'm hoping that it'll improve this year, because 2022 was a fucking shit fight and 2023's been pretty nasty so far. But he's hoping that as things pick up for that'll lead to some excitement on those things. And look, I'm grateful for it and I enjoy the gigs when I'm there, but it's just RPG stuff. Look, there's plenty of RPG stuff like Twilight 2000. So that's what I was mentioning before about a solo campaign. I may eventually pitch that to my group. Having also moved regionally now, I'm kind of in this funny space where I've got all these physical books, but I'm gaming online on Discord, which is fine. I've still got my dice tray and stuff. I still need that tactile sensory element to gaming, tabletop gaming, even if I'm running it, because there's something really dissatisfying for me about not having that element in my gaming. So as you might have seen on Instagram, there's still my dice tray and all that sort of thing. But anyway, so there's heaps of stuff. And I think as the world starts to recuperate in terms of logistics and production, even though, contrary to my previous episode, things are a little bit fucked, I think things are starting to get a little bit better. I mean, I just got the Deep Rock Galactic board game, the Frosthaven board game. Oh God, I can't wait. But I've got so much stuff that I backed during lockdown or post-lockdown that's finally being released. So this Twilight 2000 box set, which I've already got. So I may do some solo content on that on here. There's Forbidden Lands, which I'm thinking about pitching to my players for the next campaign, because I've actually never run a fantasy campaign before. I've been very stuck in, I have a tendency to, whether I kind of like it or not, and read of this what you will, maybe it's the lefty in me, or maybe it's some like unconscious watch it all burn thing, but I'm very geared towards post-apoc and dystopian settings, which Forbidden Lands kind of is. But anyway, so there's that. But also incoming up, there's so much Kickstarter stuff that's all coming this year. There's the Mothership RPG, which is very kind of alien franchise space horror. Very excited to get that. There's another goddamn Battletech Kickstarter coming. Jesus Christ, I backed that way too hard. There's all my unpainted, unplayed games, and if I look next to me, I've got Imperial Assault with 2 expansions that hasn't been played. Descent 2nd edition, haven't played that. Haven't played Legion. I don't even want to look over there. Mage Knight, all sorts of stuff. And I am thinking of potentially doing something where I have like a webcam and I stream myself playing those games. But I also thought, I can always just do similar to what I was saying before, like a post-mortem. Why do I keep using that word? Post hoc. Like, after them. You know what I mean? Talking about it after I've played it. There's War Surge, which is a minis-agnostic war game from an Aussie company, which I'm really excited about. That's on its way. Just saw today. God damn it, my wallet's going to die this year. Homeworld, the amazing series Homeworld, they just released a tabletop, which can be solo, co-op, or PvP, which also sucks, because if you tell me that a board game has solo or co-op options, you've got me. I'm in. I kickstarted the Monty Python RPG, so that was spiffing, jolly good. The Wicked Ones RPG, which that'll be interesting. That's kind of like Dungeon Keeper, the RPG, and it has like a Necromancer expansion, which is fucking awesome. Iron Sworn Traveler, so like a supplement to help you play Iron Sworn pen and paper wherever you'd like, and then a stupid amount of RPGs that are in some of those absolutely fantastic itch.io bundles. Lots of solo RPGs and journaling RPGs, which could be interesting to get into. So yeah, there's plenty of stuff lined up, and that's all stuff that, look, I would like to sort of focus on having fun with it first, but it's all in the pipeline for this podcast as well. And if I look at stuff that I'm thinking about, potentially backing as well, there's a lot of video games coming out this year that are sort of really, really kind of alerting the radar, whatever the hell that means. There's a lot of stuff. Wildermyth, and just too many. There's too many video games. So I guess in terms of being a more positive bookend of the discussion I just had, there is a lot there for me to look forward to in my life this year. There's a lot for me to look forward to in my personal life, but from a hobby perspective, I've got so much on the go, and I'm really excited about it, even though I am not really feeling it. I don't know if that makes sense. I think I'll become more excited closer to the time, say, when I'm driving to some of these gigs, when I receive some of these things, I start playing them. Obviously, this is a lot, and I do need to balance the practical reality of, okay, managing my time, and do I make a decision as to, do I spend more time editing and tightening up and all that sort of stuff with this podcast, which I plan on doing because it'd be good practice for the music stuff. But for now, I just need to be okay with working with what I have and where I'm at. And I think that I want to kind of lead by example there. And I want to lead by example as someone who's in mental illness recovery, someone who's neurodivergent and having a rough fucking time of it. I'd like to think that, if I can exemplify, it's not like a directive, but I'd like to think that I can kind of demonstrate that if you're having a rough time, if you're feeling kind of, outcast or subjugated by everything that's going on, and how the fuck couldn't you, unless you're in a position of privilege, in which case, lucky you probably won't be interested in this podcast. Then, look, I really do believe that, we're multidimensional, and there's a lot of layers and variables to us as people. And I think we need to start moving away from pure pathology model of mental health, which we are, at least trying to. And if we really want to incorporate well-being for ourselves and the people we love, then we also need to foster communities around these sorts of things and not do them in isolation. So I want to share some good experiences, some thoughts, and some fun with you, because these are dark times in a lot of ways, and I want to at least have some fun before the planet boils over, first of all. And second, just show that people who are mentally ill or struggling can still find meaning and enjoyment in their lives. And I think that's the main crux of this podcast. And yeah, let me walk alongside you in that journey. So look, if you are interested in having a chat about anything discussed here, innerstrengthcheck.com. I've got a Twitch that I sporadically go on. I've got an Instagram that is increasingly annoying me because Instagram and Facebook are basically just becoming Mark Zuckerberg's pseudo TikToks, but we won't get into that today. But I'm on there, same name, and yeah, I hope everyone has a great day, and I'm actually off to go put my money where my motherfucking mouth is and play me some guitar and some video games because it's my week off. All right, catch you guys. Take it easy.